He screamed through the duct tape, his skin blistering under the blowtorch. She leaned in close, her voice calm, almost tender, and whispered, "This is what love costs." To the outside world, they were Atlanta's black power couple, that had it all, the wealth, beauty, 2 beautiful kids, and a house that looked like it belonged on the cover of a luxury home magazine. She was elegance. He was success. Together, they were untouchable. Or so it seemed. For 8 years, she played the perfect and devoted wife. But everything changed with one phone call. One woman. One secret so devastating it didn't just break her heart, it shattered something inside her. And what rose from the ashes wasn't grief. It was fury. Cold. Methodical. Unforgiving. What could drive a woman who had everything to strap her husband to a chair, drug him, torture him, and watch him die by her own hand? How does love turn to rage, and rage to murder? Before we unravel the shocking story of Laquavia Benton and the brutal crime that shook an entire community, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, where we unravel the most shocking true crimes. Because sometimes, the darkest tales come from the most beautiful homes. Laquavia Benton was 34 years old and everything a woman was expected to be: poised, elegant, and fiercely loyal to her husband, Terrian Breck. A respected paralegal with a spotless reputation, she built her life on discipline, faith, and tradition. Raised in a strict but loving household in Savannah, Georgia, Laquavia believed in the power of commitment. She didn't just believe in marriage, she worshipped it. Her social media painted the perfect picture: family portraits in color-coordinated outfits, Bible verses about love and patience, candlelit date nights captioned with, "Still his favorite girl." She didn't smoke. She didn't curse. She kept a vision board on her nightstand and prayed over her kids every morning before school. To friends and followers, Laquavia was goals, a walking embodiment of #Black Love, #WifeLife, and #FamilyFirst. Terrian Breck was 37, and from the outside, he looked like the ideal match. He was an ambitious financial consultant with clients across Georgia, always dressed in designer suits, his skin always glowing, his Rolex always catching the light. He was handsome, articulate, successful, one of those men who made everyone in the room lean in when he spoke. A 6-figure income, a spotless LinkedIn profile, and just enough charm to disarm. Together, they lived in a modern colonial in Laquavia, Georgia, a quiet, tree-lined suburb just outside Atlanta. Their home had marble countertops, hand-picked furniture from West Elm, with their 2 children and a Doberman named Zulu that Terrian insisted was part of the brand. Their 2 children were honor roll students. Their fridge was covered in art projects and vacation magnets. Their driveway stayed clean, their grass was manicured, and their neighbors admired them. They threw lavish birthday parties with balloon walls and catered buffets. They took family trips to Turks and Caicos, posed on white sand beaches in coordinated swimsuits. Every Friday night was date night, expensive steakhouses, private booths, candlelight, filtered photos posted before the food even hit the table. They looked like a couple who had figured it all out, 2 black professionals thriving in the suburbs, balancing family and success with ease. But that was the image. Behind the curated Instagram posts and Sunday brunch smiles, something darker simmered. Laquavia was crumbling, though she didn't know it yet. The life she was holding together so carefully was already coming apart, one lie at a time. And Terrian? Terrian wasn't just a man with a secret. He was a man with layers of deception, each one more dangerous than the last. He was never violent. He didn't yell. He never raised a hand or a voice. That was what made his betrayal so insidious. He was calm. Methodical. Deeply manipulative. He told lies with a smile, crafted alibis without blinking, and played the long game with quiet precision. Terrian Breck didn't make mistakes, he made moves. And while Laquavia was posting anniversary tributes and organizing school bake sales, he was living another life entirely. They say when something seems too perfect, it usually is. And in the case of Laquavia and Terrian Breck, the illusion of black excellence was just that, an illusion. A mask. A beautiful, well-lit stage hiding a nightmare waiting to unfold. And when it finally did, the blood didn't just stain the walls, it shattered the myth that some loves are too perfect to break. For 3 years, Terrian Breck lived a lie so bold, so complex, it felt like something out of a psychological thriller. While he was posing for family portraits with Laquavia in Lithonia, he was also slipping off to Decatur to play house with another woman. Her name was Chardine Mays, a 24-year-old esthetician with a body built for attention, an Instagram feed full of thirst traps, and a viral lip gloss line that had her followers calling her the next beauty mogul. She looked like a younger version of Laquavia, same skin tone, same hourglass shape, but that's where the similarities ended. Chardine was loud, impulsive, chaotic. She smoked hookah on live, danced in fishnets to trap music, and made her money fast. Most dangerously, she wasn't just attracted to Terrian, she was obsessed. She called him her soulmate. Posted cryptic captions like, "Married in spirit, watch God make it legal," even though no one knew just how literal that caption really was. Because this wasn't just some affair. Chardine wasn't a mistress. She was a wife. His other wife. Terrian had created an entirely separate identity, using forged documents. He married Chardine legally in Alabama under the name Terrian Wardell Blake. Different last name, different social security number, even a second bank account. He kept 2 wallets, each filled with photos of the family he was with at the time. One had pictures of Laquavia and the kids. The other? Chardine and their son, Trevon. Yes, a son. While Laquavia was planning anniversary dinners and organizing PTA meetings, Terrian was raising a secret child. Trevon was 2 years old. Conceived while Terrian was still crawling into bed with his wife in Lithonia. He had 2 homes. 2 routines. He told Laquavia he had late client meetings. He told Chardine he had to visit his sick aunt. And somehow, for 3 years, it worked. Until the day it didn't. It all began on a Thursday evening. Laquavia was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of collard greens when her phone rang. Unknown number. At first, she ignored it. But it rang again. And again. Finally, she answered, and the voice on the other end was female, low, rough, and furious. "Tell your husband to stop sleeping in my bed." Click. Laquavia froze. At first, she assumed it was some petty girl playing games. Terrian was well-dressed and fine, sure, but she'd never known him to cheat. She brushed it off and kept cooking. But the next day, the messages came. First, a screenshot. Terrian's number saved as "hubby forever." Then photos. One of him shirtless in a bed that wasn't theirs. One of him brushing a toddler's hair. Then came a voice note, Chardine yelling in the background while Terrian tried to calm her down, saying, "You knew what this was. Don't mess up what we got." And then the final blow, a video. Terrian, holding a little boy, maybe 2 years old. The child had the same dimples as their daughter, the same almond-shaped eyes. Terrian kissed his cheek and said softly, "Daddy loves you, Trey." Trey. Laquavia dropped the phone. Everything went silent. The sounds of dinner cooking faded behind the rushing in her ears. That was the moment everything she knew cracked down the middle. Her husband, her life, was a lie. And not just a betrayal of vows. This was betrayal on a level she couldn't comprehend. Forgery. Bigamy. A whole other family. A child born of deceit. And the worst part? Chardine didn't even know about her either. They were both living in the dark. 2 women. 1 man. 2 lives. 1 lie. And as Laquavia sat on the kitchen floor, staring at the paused frame of her husband with his secret son, something inside her shifted. The pain was sharp, immediate. She didn't scream. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't even stop making his dinner. After the video, Laquavia Benton went quiet. But it wasn't the silence of heartbreak, it was the silence of calculation. From the outside, nothing changed. She still posted inspirational quotes on Instagram, still dropped the kids off at school with a kiss, still tagged Tyrion in "Man Crush Monday" posts. But inside, something was unraveling. She didn't confront him. Not once. She watched him instead. Studied him like a case file. Where he went, what time he left, how long he was gone, who he texted when he thought she wasn't looking. She memorized the rhythm of his lies. Then she created someone new, an online persona. A fake profile with carefully curated photos, just attractive enough to seem real, just vague enough to avoid suspicion. She slid into Shardine May's DMs with ease. Told her she loved her gloss line, asked for skincare tips, bonded over being played by the same man. And Shardine, with her big energy and even bigger emotions, opened up. That's when Laquavia learned the real horror. Shardine genuinely believed Laquavia was dead. Tyrion had told her that his first wife had died from breast cancer. He even showed her a fake obituary. To Shardine, Laquavia was a ghost, a tragic backstory. And she was the legitimate wife. She called herself Mrs. Breck, posted wedding photos in a private Facebook album titled Mrs. Breck 4L. She had no idea that the woman she was chatting with, the woman giving her skincare advice, was the very same woman she believed had been 6 feet under for years. And then, Laquavia found the life insurance policy. $850,000. Filed 6 months before she got that first call. Her name on the policy, but not as the one cashing in. The beneficiary? Shardine Mays. That's when obsession turned into something else. Something irreversible. She didn't cry. She started planning. First, she reached out to her cousin, a nurse's aide at an assisted living facility just outside of Atlanta. Slipped her a few $100s in cash for the right cocktail, crushed sleeping pills, ketamine, and fentanyl, enough to knock out a man twice Tyrion's size. She researched dosages, side effects, metabolism rates. She wanted him awake just long enough. Then she hit the stores, quietly, methodically. A pack of industrial zip ties from Home Depot. Heavy-duty duct tape. A hunting knife from a Bass Pro in Gwinnett. And finally, the piece de resistance, a mini blowtorch. She bought it under the guise of a home project and paid in cash. She rehearsed everything in her head like a script. Timing, positioning, cleanup. Every move had a purpose. She even practiced the knot she would use with the zip ties. And through it all, she never flinched. On social media, she was still the perfect wife. Posting selfies in her Sunday best. A birthday reel for her daughter. A filtered photo of her and Tyrion with the caption, "Forever my king." No one could see the rage beneath the lip gloss and smiles. Every night, she lay next to the man who plotted her death for profit, and smiled. Until one night, she decided it was time to stop smiling. March 13th started like any other Thursday. The kids were at Laquavia's mother's house for the weekend, a little break she and Tyrion called Date Reset. She told him she wanted to make it special, rekindle things. She wore that silk robe he bought her in Miami, the pale champagne-colored one he always liked. She lit candles, played his favorite Anita Baker playlist, and cooked his favorite meal, lamb chops, garlic mashed potatoes, and asparagus with lemon zest. The wine was already breathing on the counter when he walked in, his favorite Malbec, aged just right. He had no reason to suspect anything. Why would he? This was the woman who had stood beside him for 8 years, who bore his children, who ironed his shirts and curled up next to him during thunderstorms. This was the woman who had smiled through every one of his lies. He sat down, kissed her cheek, and toasted to new beginnings. She smiled back. She poured the wine slowly, deliberately, and he drank it in one gulp. The drugs worked fast. Within minutes, his limbs went heavy, his tongue too thick to form words. He blinked slowly, trying to lift his arms, but they wouldn't move. Laquavia caught him as he started to slide from the chair. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't crying. She was steady. She zip-tied his wrists and ankles, reinforced it with duct tape, and dragged him back upright. She duct-taped his mouth shut and tilted his head so he could see the laptop screen on the kitchen island. And then, she pressed play. Their wedding video lit up the screen. The vows. The kiss. The cheers. The montage of their honeymoon in Jamaica. It played on loop. She made sure he was awake. She sat beside him and whispered in his ear everything she had discovered. Chardine. The baby. The lies. The policy. He moaned behind the tape, tears already streaming down his face. She leaned in, looked him in the eyes, and said, "You should have let me die of cancer." That would have been kinder. When he started to cry, she laughed. Loud. Almost joyful. Like something inside her had finally snapped free. Then she stood up, walked to the cabinet under the sink, and pulled out the blowtorch. He shook his head as best he could. Tried to scream through the tape. It started with his legs. The skin sizzled under the flame, blistering, cracking. The scent of burning flesh filled the kitchen. He thrashed, but the drugs made him slow. He couldn't stop it. Couldn't fight. She moved methodically, his chest next. His arms. She made him watch. When he passed out, she waited. Waited until the soft, wet gasps returned. Until he opened his eyes again. That's when she brought out the knife. A hunting blade, freshly sharpened. She didn't stab to kill. She stabbed to make him feel it. 17 times. Slow, calculated. Abdomen. Thigh. Rib cage. His screams were muffled by the tape, but the sound, wet, animal, desperate, still found its way through the cracks. She made him bleed out over the course of 45 minutes. And through it all, the wedding video kept playing. At 10:42 p.m., a neighbor called 911 after hearing what they described as a wounded dog howling in pain. By the time police arrived, the house was heavy with smoke and iron, the smell of blood, flesh, fire. The kitchen was drenched in red. Terrian's body was still strapped to the chair, barely recognizable, limbs charred and twitching, blood pooling around his feet. And there, on the front porch, sat Laquavia. Calm. Barefoot. Robe stained red, knife still in her hand. When officers asked what happened, she looked up, expression blank, and said, "I finally finished dinner." She was arrested without resistance. Still barefoot, still holding the knife. When the officers handcuffed her, Laquavia didn't flinch. Didn't scream. Didn't ask for a lawyer. She just said, "Make sure my kids don't see the house." The media storm began that same night. By sunrise, the Breck residence was plastered across every news outlet in Georgia. Helicopters hovered. Neighbors whispered. And within 24 hours, the headlines had a new name for her, the Blowtorch Bride. At arraignment, she pled not guilty. Her attorney argued temporary insanity, emotional trauma, and cumulative abuse. But the prosecution came armed with receipts, months of planning, internet searches, purchases of weapons, drugs, and surveillance equipment. They painted her not as a victim, but a patient, deliberate executioner. And then came the trial. The courtroom was packed from day one. Family, press, activists, even TikTok influencers trying to document the case. The judge enforced a strict decorum, but nothing could tame the electric tension. This wasn't just a murder trial, it was a referendum on betrayal, love, womanhood, and rage. The prosecution led with visuals, photos of the crime scene, the melted flesh, the burnt skin, the knife wounds, 17 of them. They brought in a medical examiner who described the injuries in stomach-turning detail. He said Tarion had been conscious for at least 80% of the ordeal, and called it one of the most agonizing deaths he'd ever seen in his career. Jurors cried. A few had to step out. Then came the life insurance policy. $850,000. The sole beneficiary? Chardine Mays. And that's when the defense shifted gears. They brought out the fake Instagram account Laquavia had used to befriend Chardine. They read the messages aloud, how Chardine believed Laquavia had died of breast cancer 3 years earlier. When Chardine took the stand, the courtroom went silent. She was visibly shaking. She wore no makeup. Her voice cracked as she told the jury, he said his wife passed away. I thought I was helping him heal. She described how she and Tarion had begun planning their real wedding. Showed the invitations. The dress fittings. The Pinterest board of venue ideas. And then she paused, looked at Laquavia, and said, I didn't know she was alive. If I had, I would have walked away. It was the one moment Laquavia showed emotion. A single tear. Quickly wiped away. The defense leaned hard on that. Gaslighting. Double lives. The emotional erosion of discovering you were not only betrayed, but erased. But the prosecution fired back, even if every lie were true, it didn't justify torture. They replayed the 911 call. The neighbor's voice, panicked. The screams in the background. The prosecutor leaned on the jury box and said, this wasn't a woman scorned. This was vengeance scripted like a horror film. And finally, they played the wedding video. The same one Laquavia had forced Tarion to watch as he burned. It echoed through the courtroom, the music, the vows, the laughter. 2 days of deliberation. That's all it took. The jury found her guilty of first-degree murder with aggravated torture. When the judge read the verdict, Laquavia didn't blink. She just stared straight ahead, as if she'd already known how this story would end. At sentencing, the judge's voice broke. He said, this was a methodical and deeply disturbing act of vengeance unmatched in Georgia's recent history. He handed down life without parole. And that should have been the end. But outside those courthouse doors, the real trial was just beginning. The internet exploded. Some called her a monster, cold, calculating, evil. Others crowned her a vigilante queen. Hashtags like #FreeLaquavia and #Tarion had it coming flooded social media. Memes. Edits. Think pieces. Even merch. True crime podcasts picked it up. YouTube sleuths analyzed her court outfits, her facial expressions, her final words. Laquavia Benton didn't just kill her husband, she made him feel every second of the pain he caused her. She stripped him of the lies he lived behind, exposed the double life he thought he could juggle forever, and dragged him into a brutal, bloody truth he never saw coming. But the question lingers like smoke in that Lithonia kitchen, was Laquavia a victim of psychological abuse who finally broke? Or a cold, calculating killer who snapped when her fantasy collapsed? Was this the unraveling of a woman lied to, erased, and gaslit until the walls of her reality gave way? Or was it the ultimate act of revenge, choreographed with terrifying precision by someone who wanted more than justice, she wanted pain? Whatever you believe, the story of Laquavia Benton is one we won't forget. If this case left you speechless, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of twisted love, deadly secrets, and betrayal that ends in bloodshed. Because here, real life will always be more chilling than anything you could make up.